Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and today we will be going through the waiver wire for week 3 of the fantasy football season. For the most part, I'm sticking to less than 50% ownership on the ESPN app, but I do go search out a couple other sources just to make sure I'm not necessarily missing anyone, or that sometimes, depending on the platform, ownership percentages are way different from one to another. So, especially like Garrett Wilson here was 70% owned on ESPN, and Fantasy Pros said he's 34% owned. I saw a lot of low scores in my league this week, so don't be too down if you're had a bad week. Hopefully things will get better, whether you're 2-0, 0-2, 1-1. The season is still young, so we can all improve our teams, and here is going to be some ways of how. I will be looking through not only waiver wire pickups, but in some cases, some sort of potential drop options, those kinds of things. So let's start off with the quarterback position. And up top, I do have Trevor Lawrence as the number one waiver wire pickup. There's not a lot of great pickups in general this week. Luckily, got through the week without too many injuries, especially major injuries, if any, really outside of non-fantasy purposes. There were a couple scary instances. So hopefully everybody's doing fine this week who had real-world injuries. I always wish the best for them and appreciate them putting their bodies on the lines for us and our entertainment. Which brings us back to Trevor Lawrence here. The issue for me with Trevor Lawrence is, especially in the short term, a couple of high upside but tough matchups going up against the Chargers and the Eagles in the next 2 weeks, and both of them are away games at those teams' homes. So definitely a guy I'm happy to roster, but in the short term, he may not be the absolute best option, or once again, he's a risky option over the next 2 weeks, it would appear. Then Jared Goff is going to be the number 2 option. Feels ugly, but no, when Jared Goff has weapons around him, he is a fine quarterback, and so far this season, he's done well. I think he's number 9 in my league. We have a little bit different rules in standard leagues, but nothing too crazy out there. And it does appear that he has a nice season-long schedule, so there is some comfort in taking him just as far as a long-term option. I am believing to some extent that what we have seen in these first 2 weeks is not some sort of apparition for the Lions. Then Justin Fields comes in here as my third-ish option, probably the riskiest option of anything out here. He has obviously had a rough start to the season, but his schedule does brighten up a little bit going forward. The NFC North does not have the toughest opponents this year, just as far as the other conferences or divisions that they're playing against. So, Justin Fields is a risky option, but there's not a whole lot of options. Marcus Mariota, I would say, also somewhat risky, and what I classify him as would be a high floor, but not a safe floor kind of guy, and this week was really the exact reason for that rating. He had 3 turnovers, and his rushing does give him a higher floor, which is usually a safer floor, but there are some major issues with his accuracy so far as a thrower, and because of that rushing, and because of maybe not having the best offensive line, and because of his accuracy issues, turnovers are probably going to be a thing for him. So that hurts his the safety net with that floor. Not the absolute best team in the world, but they're better than last season, I think. And then he has a low ceiling, in part for those reasons, in part just because this offense is not one that you expect to be a high-flying offense. Jameis Winston, I just wanted to bring up as probably a drop candidate or a concern yellow flag type guy. I don't even think he's 50% owned. But the issue is, just before game time, we learned that he has like 4 broken things in his back, bones, fractures going on in his back. That doesn't sound too pretty. I would be concerned about the playmakers there to some extent. I would not be expecting Jameis Winston to be making it throughout the whole season. So that's one thing where if he's your guy, maybe you start thinking of going elsewhere or hedging that bet a little bit and getting somebody else as a backup, whatever the exact case. So, yeah, just wanted to throw out the yellow flags there for Jameis. And then Jimmy Garoppolo here at the bottom. Basically just wanted to point out that I don't think he's a great pickup. He does make the fantasy options around him more safer, better options. But in 2021, my equalized value charts had Jimmy Garoppolo averaging as a quarterback 18 and put him right in the range below some of these and maybe above, for sure, I think one spot above Mac Jones, one spot below Derek Carr, somewhere around Teddy Bridgewater, and then Tua Tagovailoa was a little ways above him, but all in that range. So if you remember how those guys produced as fantasy quarterbacks last season, that was how Jimmy Garoppolo produced as well last season, and there's no real changes to that offense to expect much difference this season. So I don't think he's some high-flying option off of the fantasy waiver wire, but obviously he's an okay middling option, maybe a little safer than a Justin Fields, and maybe in the same range as a Marcus Mariota, I would say. Moving on to the running backs. I hate when I say I would say. I did say that. I literally said that. Of course I would say it. So, we start the running backs off with a guy above the ESPN, above my waiver percentage here, but right on the borderline, and that is Raheem Mostert. I can't believe he is this unowned, but one thing about these platforms and their starting percentages is they do get skewed, I believe, from non-competitive leagues to some extent, and I would assume, especially earlier drafted teams, they wouldn't have been drafting Raheem Mostert at one point in the offseason at all. So who knows exactly what his ownership percentage is in starting leagues, but here is the thing. Raheem Mostert has a coaching staff who is familiar with him. Came from Kyle Shanahan? Came from Shanahan in, they were with Raheem Mostert there in San Francisco. So that's a positive for him. Another positive is it appears he may have taken over the starting role there. That may be a little bit more game plan dependent. I don't expect either one of those to have him or Chase Edmonds to have some sort of amazing or dominant percentage of the snap share there in a rushing game. That's probably not going to be the highlight of that offense. And that is the last thing. The run game is a bit of a question mark there. So, the ceiling isn't incredibly high for a Raheem Mostert or a Chase Edmonds, but looks like I would rather have Raheem Mostert than Chase Edmonds at this point. Which brings us to Brian Robinson as my number 2 waiver wire option at running back this week. Here's the time to get ahead of the curve. Now, I do have concerns being in that Washington offense, mostly because of that defense, who is like whatever the opposite of a dam is. It's like a river of just allowing. It's Swiss cheese. So bad. Swiss cheese of a defense there. It's not looking good at Washington at all. So I don't know. Having a bruising running back, I don't know how many games he'll have a chance to go over 12 opportunities. We'll see. But if he's the real deal at all, that obviously just helps time of possession and will at least keep their defense off of the field a little bit more, which is probably don't want to get in a shootout every single week, but that's how it's looking. Then we go on to, in a group here, I have Jamal Williams, J.D. McKissick, who's going up against Philadelphia. Just wanted to point that out. I think that's probably a friendly matchup for J.D. McKissick. In the long term, with Brian Robinson coming back, I do wonder if J.D. McKissick's role will stay the same or if Antonio Gibson takes over some of the J.D. McKissick role, which I think would be very possible. So there are some long-term concerns with him, but I do like him, especially this week. Darrell Williams / Eno Benjamin. Talked a little bit about this in my Saturday morning video, if you wanted to go back and see more on that. But essentially, it appears that Darrell Williams will be the lead running back. I mean, it's probably a 1A, 1B situation, probably a 60-40-ish situation. There's no guarantee that Darrell Williams is that guy, but it does appear so by a little bit. I would just say if you are someone who grabbed Eno Benjamin, is holding on to him, it may not be a bad idea to continue to hold on to him, especially if you aren't in a situation where you need another running back to start this week, just to see if that bears out, or if in the event that James Conner goes down for a long term, do you have a 1A at least there in Arizona? And then Jerick McKinnon, I've brought this up before. He is the receiving option there in Kansas City. They throw a lot. It's a great offense. He's not going to score every week. There's a lot of options to throw the ball to in that offense. So that is why he's at the back of this little list of guys who you can actually play at this point in time. Essentially, who I also think are roster worthy. Then we're going to go to maybe the opposite end of that spectrum to some differing extents. Nyheim Hines has a 65% ownership in ESPN right now. That's too high. That's all I got to say. James Cook, if you are looking at his box score, that is deceptive as all heck. I am quite sure that all of his usage came in after the game was locked up and was literally like over with in the fourth quarter. It just happened to be a long period of time that the game was over with, so he got a fair amount of opportunities, and he did look good in that. But James Cook, I would put, he's somewhere in this group of guys, and I don't think he's at the top. He's maybe right along with a Jaylen Warren type option for me there. Then Rex Burkhead, also, he's too highly owned. That 40% ownership is too high. And Alexander Mattison is also too highly owned. As we can see, that offense is something different now. Alexander Mattison is not the he's not the high quality backup that he used to be because of the changes in that offense. Unfortunately, Alexander Mattison also goes down to, I would say, the back end of this kind of list here that we will get to shortly. Before that, Mark Ingram is a deep league kind of guy. He did look okay out there on Sunday. I don't really want him unless I'm in a deep league, though. And then Tyler Algier, we don't know for sure when Damian Williams gets back if Tyler Algier still has this role. But that backfield did look more like I thought it would preseason, in the sense that I would say at a minimum, maybe were my thoughts, the rushing attempts would be split between, I thought, Tyler Algier and Cordarrelle Patterson. And then Patterson would be moved around a little bit more into slot roles and maybe in two running back sets, running routes, and etc. So, Tyler Algier looked fine out there. This is more of a hopeful. He may have a role where he would be in these Jamal Williams type of usability, flex potential throughout bye weeks, especially as an RB2 or flex spot in a pinch, and also would just have the upside in case of an injury. But he's a very risky add, I will add. And then Kenneth Gainwell, he's also in this group, just I would say at the bottom of it, because I don't know that he definitely doesn't get the entirety of Miles Sanders' role if Miles Sanders goes down, but he does have a role there in a good offense, and week 1 games, there will be some of those. So in a pinch, if you had to throw him out there, there's an upside to it. Then Khalil Herbert, Rashad White, Zamir White, Jaylen Warren are all of the high upside, can't start kind of guys unless there's an injury to the starter for their teams. So just wanted to throw a reminder out for those guys that they are excellent backups to have if you have the type of roster where you can hold on to one of these guys. And I definitely prefer these types to some of these guys, if especially to the Nyheim Hines and the Rex Burkheads of the world. And like I said, I would want them over Alexander Mattison at this point in time. Moving on to the wide receiver options, Garrett Wilson went over this 70% ownership in ESPN, but I know he's available in my league. I almost picked him up this week with Michael Pittman going down and having a spot there, but went a different route. And wish I hadn't. So he is by far the number 1 option in all of waiver wire land, I would say. It doesn't mean he's a guaranteed lock for this game. Potentially, earlier today, I released a video that covered that game, so you can go watch that a little bit if you want to hear more. And Nico Collins was also in that video. And just the main thing would be a condensed amount of usage. So Nico Collins probably goes into, maybe I could have put all 5 of these guys in a single grouping. But Nico Collins is on his own just because there's really no other good receiving options outside of Brandon Cooks if we want to go that far. But Nico Collins is the clear-cut number 2 high upside receiving option in that offense. And the targets were there this last week. And I wouldn't be surprised if that were to continue. So there's just some good upside, at least with Nico Collins. Sterling Shepard, the main issue is don't expect that passing offense to be very good. Do expect it to be spread around a fair amount. So I just don't know how much actual upside there is or predictability that there would be with Sterling Shepard. So he concerns me. And that's going to be similar to Devin Duvernay. Don't know how predictable that is. As the number 3 receiving option in the Baltimore offense. It's a risky spot to hold, but it is a good offense, and so there will be touchdown opportunities, high quality targets to be had, and Duvernay is a big play boy. Then Zay Jones, also a big play boy, and we saw a better week 1 here than week 2, but he's probably a little bit under-rostered. He's a solid option to have. The main reason I have him below like a Sterling Shepard is just because we can't be for sure about Jacksonville and if Trevor Lawrence is starting to turn the corner. But it was very promising to see this week for Trevor Lawrence. Probably should have talked about this up at the top. His throwing percentage was a lot higher. I assume that had a lot to do with play calling. Week 1, there seemed to be a lot of deep routes, a very Doug Peterson-esque play calling, and they may have dialed back on that to help build his confidence, which is what I expected this coaching staff to do there for Trevor Lawrence, and gave a little more high percentage throws options there for him this week. And so if that offense continues to get better and better and Trevor Lawrence builds up his confidence, Zay Jones is I would say a deadly target. He's going to have a couple of big weeks, I'm sure, this year. 2 touchdown games with over 100 yards. I would say he has 1 or 2 of those in his makeup. Then Greg Dortch falls out of these options just because he's a short-term option. He doesn't have the longevity to his value right now compared to these guys, but he is... If you're in a pinch at wide receiver and you need somebody to play, he's not a bad option for now. Now, if it's the opposite situation and you have a pretty stacked wide receiver room, but you can churn one of your a Sterling Shepard, a Nico Collins, one of these types of guys, I would turn them in and get yourself a upside pick. Now, Van Jefferson is probably probably in the same conversation as these guys, so I don't know about him. But Jameson Williams, as that Detroit offense looks better and may look all the better when they get Jameson Williams back, that could be, really good as the season goes along. A little bit risky. Don't know what we're gonna, he's a rookie and he's coming in late and hasn't had the entire off season to the same extent as other rookies. So there's some issues there. Rondale Moore, I mean, there's some plenty of question marks there too. He's in his second year there though, and I think at the very, I don't know, he's a dart throw, but he has more upside than these guys. I would say, I mean, he has at least like this Greg Dortch upside, which I said for the short term is probably better than these options. So put it like that. And then Michael Gallup, as long as you don't need to use him immediately, looks like he will be coming back soon. So now is the time to scoop him up if he is available. And you have that roster spot, definitely a high upside guy. And it looks like every day it appears like it's more possible that Dak Prescott comes back all the quicker. Then moving on to our tight ends. So I have Gerald Everett, Logan Thomas, Evan Ingram, Tyler Conklin, Irv Smith. I would say Gerald Everett is the clear-cut number one option of these guys. Not by a long shot, though. And Irv Smith is the clear-cut bottom option of these guys. Irv Smith is close to being in the same group as some of these gentlemen down here. Can you see all of those names? No, He's close to being in the same book as some of these guys down here, and he very well may be. But for now, I like that offense more than I like some of these offenses, and or like in a Mike Gesicki case, I like that offense and what I expect to be his opportunity share compared to that offense and opportunity share combination there for a Mike Gesicki. Like all these guys, and I put these three in whoever fancies you the most. You feel free to put them up top of this little list here. Then Isaiah Likely's down here on his own. He's almost like, he might be the number 3 wide receiver there in Baltimore. He's part of the concern for Devin Duvernay in some sense, as far as that ball being spread around all the more and a limited amount of targets. But when you can play that guy, the number 3 wide receiver of Baltimore, in as your tight end, he definitely maybe looks more like a Gerald Everett type of option, as high as that. I mean, he's a guy who they had to insert into this lineup because of how good he was doing in the offseason. Just say it like that. And he's, I don't think, shown any reason to lose any of that opportunity that he had earned in the preseason. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of upside there with Isaiah Likely. Which brings us to the guys that I'm saying, yeah, these are the guys to go ahead and make a trade out for a different option, giving you the okay for that. I will say, did it again, with Taysom Hill, with the concerns for Jameis Winston, I mean, is it possible they would put him into that quarterback role, or he would have at least a hybrid, they would implement a hybrid offense where Taysom Hill gets a fair amount of work from the quarterback spot, so that makes him a sleeper pickup. He's not a good tight end until that happens, in my opinion. And yeah, Albert O, Mike Gesicki, Cole Kmet, Hunter Henry, Noah Fant, David Nook, David Njoku, and Austin Hooper, all droppable. Yeah, it's tough to come up with a really good argument for any of these guys over any of these guys. Once again, Irv Smith is the closest one where I'd understand not making that move if you don't want to. So that is it for the waiver wires for week 3. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will have the rankings up hopefully sometime tomorrow. And good luck with your waivers. As far as fab goes this week, you shouldn't be spending too much on anyone in most leagues. If you have any specific questions, just drop them down into the comments, and I will try to check that throughout the day. I will be around running stats, typing in stats into me old projections all day. So take care. Goodbye. Peace out.